hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show.
What's up, guys? How are you today? I am feeling really good. Why? This is Dumb Jock, and I got a buddy of mine joining us today, Denver icon, sports media legend, Darren McKee. You might know him as D-Mac. Put your hands together at home for D-Mac. D-Mac!
Hey there.
How are you, man?
I'm doing great, Nate. This is awesome to be here. I love the show. So the tides are turned a little bit here.
Yeah.
In our relationship, but I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm going to try to make you cry.
You will succeed if you're going to try.
No.
I'm not a hard nut to crack.
Is that right?
Oh, I'm a softie.
When's the last time you cried?
Yesterday.
Really?
Yeah, I saw a mirror. Got 1,000 of them. Just
no,
like that.
No, but really,
Self-deprecation.
see, you're deflecting from an emotional question and telling a joke. I want to know the last time D-Mac has actually cried.
I had some emotions even yesterday. I've got some stuff in my personal life with my family that is pretty deep, and it's been a crazy year. So as upbeat and about sports as I try to be, there's stuff with family stuff that everybody has that kind of gets you going, a little personal. So there were some emotional moments even just yesterday.
So sports is supposed to take us away from sadness or confusion or whatever the crap is in the real world that we deal with. Sports is an escape.
Yeah.
And when an athlete is going through something off the field, he or she always finds solace on the field or on the court or on the ice because you can just kind of forget about that. One of the struggles I had with sports media, well, do have, but mostly with the radio, because we were colleagues at a former radio station.
Yep.
Was the difficulty in having an awful morning, just like being so frustrated. I had a baby and just like, things weren't going well, or if I was frustrated with this or that. And then to come in, crack the mic and be like, all right, what's up, guys? What a game last night.
Yeah.
How have you compartmentalized that over the years?
It's the difference between the great Joe Williams once said, anybody can fill up time. Can you get paid for it? And it's the difference between, it's like when that band says, I'm quitting my day job, and you make a full commitment to being a professional. So what's the difference between being somebody who's dabbling around in something and treating it like a profession? And radio is no different than, I would say, any sport or something that you're serious about. And at the end of the day, nobody really gives a shit if you're having a bad day. Not that the audience doesn't care that you're honest. I think the audience does care about that. But at the end of the day, on radio, you're there to fill up a 15 to 20 minute commute. So, and then you have to do it over and over and over again. So how good are you going to be in that 15 or 20 minutes? Now, it didn't happen overnight. I had to have a lot of reps to figure that out, but I figured it out, and I'm not perfect all the time, but in the back of my mind, I know why I'm there and what I'm trying to do. And it's not about me. It isn't about me, although I can use myself as self-deprecation. It's about whoever's listening or watching. It's always about that person, never you. And people don't listen to radio in groups. It's always about specifically one person at a time.
Yeah.
So to address, it's a bad radio habit. Hello, Denver. Hello, Colorado. Hello. No, how you doing?
Yeah.
Are you doing okay? That's the intimacy of radio.
So, you talk about making it about the person who's out there listening and the sports you're covering. But over the years, you've also shared a lot of your personal life. Mm-hmm. And you don't get to choose when something happens in your life that moves you or affects you as a human being. How do you decide as an on-air personality how much of your own life to share and what to give of what's actually going on inside of you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there's definitely shows that I've left and like, that was too much. I don't know what I did. That was embarrassing that I actually did what I did there.
Like what? What's an example of that?
Oh, you just, you feel like you overshare and that it's not all that interesting and that you have been too narcissistic about what you've been doing. You've got to, just telling a story.
Yeah.
Like, I could jabber on forever, way too much. So how can you be more concise and relate again to that audience while talking about yourself? You've got to understand what the limits are. And when I was younger, I don't think I had a cap on that. I think I went way too much. So I try to be more conscious of it as I, get older and hopefully better at what I'm doing. Who knows?
Yeah, but with like the death of your brother, for example, you shared what was going on the air, and you got back to work pretty quickly and as quickly as you could. But you kind of made it a tribute to what you valued in your brother, and you talked about that quite often. Was that something you had to calculate at all?
A little bit. That happened at a tricky time for me because the Avs were playing the Nashville Predators in the first round of the playoffs the year they won the Cup, and I was lucky enough to follow the Avs, which I love doing. And it's funny, the only person that I told in the world what was going on, because it happened, the accident my brother had, and he didn't die right away, but the day of the accident was Game 4, and the only person I told was Jesse, who works here at Gorilla, and because I was going to be gone for a little bit, and I was off the air for a little bit, but I wanted to work. I wanted to keep following the Avs. I did miss one playoff game. I missed Game 2 of the series against St. Louis for my brother's funeral. My brother sadly was in a drowning accident, and he was kept alive by machines, as it turns out, for a few days. And we thought he was maybe going to be okay, and then sadly he lost brain function. He was only 50 years old, 51 maybe, and he was a genius. He's literally a genius. I'm not exaggerating. I won't go into why he's as smart as he is, but he was all of that. He's a doctor. He's a researcher, chief of radiology at his company, working on lung testing for cancer victims with his sister, who's a radiation oncologist, or his sister, my sister-in-law, his wife, who's also a brilliant person, Andrea. Anyways, it benefited me to work, and I did feel at some point I should share that. I'm glad I did. It seemed to connect with people and was an honest moment. That is obviously a pretty rare occasion, but I felt like I've developed enough of a relationship with the audience that it was kind of okay to do that. But it's tricky. It's a tough thing to navigate in terms of what you share. I do think the one thing I've tried to do with the audience, I do think I've been honest about who I am the whole time. So when you hear me say something, as outrageous as it might sound, it's not manufactured. It literally is what I believe. And you would know better than anything because we've had a million conversations off the air, on the air. So you'd be better than me to tell me, am I phony or not? Or is this really who I am?
It's who you are. So
I hope.
Well, but so why do you get the label as like an antagonist?
I don't really get that, actually, because to me, I think that's part of my heritage. So I grew up in an Irish Catholic family in Boston where you talked about sex and politics and race and everything. You talked about everything at the dinner table.
Yeah.
Everything at the dinner table.
Yeah.
One of my favorite stories is my wife, who I met in college, and our 30th wedding anniversary is in 2 weeks. So she comes home with me for Thanksgiving while we were in college, and after dinner she goes, "Why were you guys fighting?" And I go, "We weren't fighting. That's just how we talk." And so I guess,
it's funny because I was riding around with my son in the car the other day, and I turned on the car, and the sports talk radio was on.
Yeah.
And he said the same thing. Why are they fighting? I'm like, they're not. They're just actually talking.
Well, I just got to watch myself because that's just who I am and what that's just always the way the McKee family has been, period. I mean, it's hard to get a word in edgewise. My mom comes from 7 brothers and sisters, Irish Catholic family. My dad's an Irish Catholic family.
So you had to speak up and you had to have an opinion.
I don't know another way to be. I thought anybody who didn't was weird. But I would go to like some family dinners or other people's, and they wouldn't have these same conversations. I just thought that was boring. So I'm no different than the way I grew up and the way I am. I'm not trying to be antagonistic, but I'm not trying to be shy with an opinion. And it depends how you feel that opinion, what I guess your value of that opinion.
How many years have you been in Denver, in the market?
20. Well, in this I moved here in 99, but I spent my 3rd grade year in Steamboat Springs, Mrs. Stanko's class. My dad wanted to be Hunter Thompson, who's a great writer, so he went to Steamboat to write. He was unemployed. He got fired. He made a life change when
Did he
I
run
was
for sheriff.
He could have back then. Steamboat was a real cowboy town in 1977. And so I spent third grade there, and that's when the Broncos went to the Super Bowl for the first time.
Yeah.
So it was the first time I ever remember sports.
And you became a Broncos fan?
I became a huge Broncos fan that year because they went to the Super Bowl and they lost to Dallas in 77.
Wow.
And then I moved back east, but I stayed a sports fan. So we only made it in Colorado for 1 year. His book didn't get published. His job sucked. You know, if you weren't working the ski industry or a coal mine in Craig, there wasn't a lot for you in 1977 in Steamboat Springs. So we did move back east, back to Massachusetts. So that was the 1 year in Colorado. I counted. I was there.
And you're saying you remained a Broncos fan even after going back to Massachusetts?
Sort of.
Even though they don't talk like this in Massachusetts?
They do not.
But you
Pakika.
weren't- Pakika. You weren't a Patriots fan?
I was a Patriots fan for sure, but that only lasted until I went to college and then to Buffalo, where I became a huge Bills fan, and that's where I first worked in professional sports, covering the Bills. So it was pretty easy to ditch the Patriots after that because they were in the same division. They played twice a year. I felt very ingrained with Buffalo, so that and then I haven't really looked back since. But all my parents and my relatives they're all Patriots fans.
But you were a baseball guy.
I'm a baseball guy. This is I wore this on purpose. This is the baseball organization, youth baseball organization. My wife and I started years and years ago.
Oh.
We ran it for about 4 or 5 years. The purpose of it was to allow kids and families that did not have means to play high level and compete in baseball. So we had sponsorship programs. So we had a lot of kids play cheap or for free at the same level that kids pay a lot of money to play baseball for. And a couple of the kids that I coach actually were drafted this year. So to Ethan and Nolan, congratulations.
Wow.
That's pretty neat when kids that you coached when they were 10, 11 years old actually get drafted. I had a lot of kids that played high level high school and college, but these are the first 2 kids that were in my program that actually literally got drafted and have become professional baseball players. So Ethan Sloan and Nolan Sparks, way to go. Congratulations.
And you have famously stated that if you were 5 inches taller, you would have been a Major League Baseball player.
There's no doubt I'd be in the Hall of Fame right now.
Okay.
And if I'm shrinking, Nate, which fucking sucks. Can I say that?
Yeah, fuck
okay.
yeah,
All right.
fucking
So yes, I thought I was 5'8", so 5 inches would have, I'd have been a giant. You know, I'd have been a Hall of Fame third baseman for the Boston Red Sox following Wade Boggs. There's no doubt about it.
What can you describe your skill set as a baseball player?
It's very solid. Very solid fielder. Strong, surprisingly strong arm for my stature. That's why I played third base. Not super quick, so middle infield would be tricky. So I'm way too undersized for third base. Very consistent hitter of the ball. Surprising power, again, for a guy my size. And very smart on the bases. So, I was a heady player, smart player, knew the game. Was
Gym
always...
rat. First there. First to get there.
I would win the captain's award. You know, the captain's award was always the guy who tried the hardest.
I was
always that guy.
What were your peak years of athleticism or competition, sport?
Well, I was, it's so funny. I was a captain of my soccer and baseball teams. So
in high school?
High school, yeah. And once
Letterman's jacket.
all that stuff, all-star sort of
So
thing.
were you like
sports.
the school athlete? Like
No, there were better athletes than me even in my school. And I also played varsity basketball as well, but the coach was a dick. And we were in Massachusetts and we liked to ski. So all of our games were on Friday nights. And our coach just didn't want us to ski in the winter, so he would schedule these practices that were meaningless on Saturdays, like shoot-arounds on Saturdays, which were stupid, just so we couldn't go skiing. So we quit, me and Jamie and Peter and, the guys on the team.
you took a stand.
We didn't really care that much about the guy was a dick, and, we didn't care that much. So I played varsity basketball as well.
Isn't it funny how coaches who are dicks can really change the course of your life?
No doubt about it. And coaches who are great can be the biggest impact. And there's zero doubt when we started Flash Baseball, it was to be the better side of things, to do things better. I was incredibly inspired by my coaches, actually in Little League. Barry and Steve Hopping, specifically Steve Hopping, who was my high school baseball coach, about how to do things the right way. And then Chuck Holman, my high school soccer coach. I would have probably played college sports too, and I wanted to play professional baseball. That's what I really wanted to do. But I also loved radio. And I was accepted into Syracuse, which was a high-level broadcasting school, but did not have a baseball team. They had a soccer team, and I was probably a little bit better at soccer than baseball, but they did not have a baseball team. So it was one of the biggest choices of my life at age 17. How far do I pursue this thing? And I was accepted to Boston University in Ithaca, and I probably could have played baseball at both of those places, but they weren't the same level as broadcasting schools as Syracuse. So it's a big choice at 18.
On my street, Hepner Lane in San Jose, California, we played a lot of different games.
Yeah.
We played baseball, we played soccer, we played football. We made up a game called soccer baseball.
Okay.
Where you hit a soccer ball with a baseball bat. You throw it on one bounce,
yeah,
and then you get to tee off on. It was one of the more fun dead end games you could ever think of.
Would the rebound off the ball in the bat knock you in the skull sometimes?
No, you just crushed it.
You had it down.
Oh no, you just hit it like a normal ball.
But see, and I played like wiffle ball and did things. God, this is like a get off my lawn moment. But I did live in a time where kids just made up their. I did the same.
What were some of the games
things
you guys would play in the mean streets of Massachusetts?
Oh well, we had a very specific. You could play one-on-one wiffle ball because I had a fence and a big tree in the house and a fence on the other side. So if you hit the ball the right way, you could get it in the gap between the house and the tree over a fence.
And that was the only fair.
That was fair.
So,
you could also get base hits if you hit a certain thing, and you get outs. And we had just all of our ways of doing it. I played countless hours of just one-on-one, like, wiffle ball, stuff like that. And
would you guys hide and seek?
I lived on the
stick
ocean.
Ball?
We water skied, and I was 13, 14, and
you were water skiing in the ocean?
Oh yeah. Well, the Ipswich River more than the ocean, but the river led to the ocean.
It always does.
That's right. Newsflash. I would go out in my own boat with a motor before I had my driver's license, and that wasn't unusual where I grew up. I mean, so before I could drive, I was going around in my own outboard motor boat, which was, when you think about it, way more dangerous kind of than just driving a car that you're licensed with. But that's how I grew up. I grew up on the water. I had my own boat. This wasn't anything fancy, but you could get around. You could water ski off of it, go to the beach, chase girls, that sort of thing.
Did you chase them? Did you catch any of them?
Not in high school. And it's ironic because the girl I had a super huge crush on in high school, her daughter just became a freshman at CU.
Wow.
So I just saw her, Amy's her name, and I just saw her and her husband and her daughter last week.
Oh.
We had dinner at the Sink, and she's living at...
you had dinner with your high school crush?
A high school crush and her husband.
Why?
Oh, because we've stayed friends over the years. We're just really good friends. And she certainly knows that. She knows how I felt about her. It wasn't any kind of secret.
She certainly knows what you used to do alone in your house thinking of her.
It was more about friendship.
Yeah. So did you ever take a girl out on a date on your boat?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've tried.
Right.
Mixed results.
So a lot of what people do in their lives professionally is motivated by getting the girl, right?
Yes. Okay.
When you started to realize that maybe sports at a professional level wasn't going to work for you.
You're right.
Was media sort of the way you went to kind of be around maybe your future wife, to maybe find your future wife? Did you feel like that was going to fast track you to her?
Well, that's kind of ironic because the day I met my wife, I was a sophomore, and there was a freshman girl at the college radio station who had a crush on me. And she was chasing me for a couple of weeks, and I had a big makeout session with her after I was off the air. And then I walked up to my dorm room, and my parents had started some laundry. Parents' weekend, it was horrible. My parents threw a bunch of stuff in the laundry room. It was too much for them to finish. Oh. And that's where I met my future wife.
Wow.
So there was a girl.
The freshman dorm laundry room is where a lot of people have met their future wives.
I don't know how often they meet them on a Friday night. Probably says something about both of us. But I literally, the only time I could have cashed in on my minor radio celebrity, I instantly gave away by meeting my future wife, who didn't give a crap whatsoever. And this is college radio. And so we've been together since we were 19 and 18. So,
Wow.
Nate, I've never really been able to cash in on this incredible media persona that I've been developing for, 38 years. So I guess the answer is no. What a wasted opportunity.
But you did meet your wife in the laundry room of your dorm.
I did. Del Plain Hall, Syracuse, 1988. We got married.
What did you say? Like, do you have any extra quarters?
It was kind of like that. It was just getting laundry out. I just
this darn thing always acting up.
It was kind of like that. And then I invited her up to my room.
Right then and there?
Right. We were talking, and I said, hey, if you want to come on up, come on up. I had a roommate at the time, and I had big PA speakers with a microphone. I had like a PA system because I was in a band, and I just took my gear with me. And we put the speaker out the window, and we're just yelling at drunk people making their way back into the dorms. You couldn't really tell where
That's
the voices
fun.
were coming from, so
That's
we're
fun.
kind of heckling people. And
Yeah.
the next night, I got hammered on Parents' Week, and I went down and I wrote something on her board. Like everybody has those college dorms. Said,
Yeah.
hey, why don't you come by? And I was kind of drunk, and I never saw her. She knocks on the door the next morning. This is Sunday morning, and she goes, I got an important question. And I go, oh, this is going to determine like our lives together. She goes, are you a Republican or a Democrat? And I go, I'm a Democrat. And we went to see Lloyd Benson debate Dan Quayle in the vice presidential debate. That's the famous I knew JFK, you're no JFK sort of moment.
Wow.
And kind of got a little smooch after that one. Very romantic. We drank Busch beers at the vice presidential debate.
Wow.
At the College of Democrats. The once and only time I ever went to a meeting of the Syracuse Democrats.
Okay.
That was it. So
I was gonna say because you're a sports talk guy.
Yeah.
You're not a politics talk guy, but you have some strong political views. Clearly.
Well, I thought I was going to be a politics guy. In fact, I did 2.5 years on KOA 630 KHOW and AM 760, which was Air America at the time, progressive talk station. I filled in for everybody. So I filled in for Jay Marvin, for Peter Boyles, for Dave Logan. I worked there for 2.5 years doing no sports whatsoever. I actually thought I was going to go more political talk. I thought sports talk was kind of like the JV. It wasn't really all that serious. It was just, whatever. It wasn't as, like the news talk angle of things. But unfortunately, what I learned in news talk is that it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. It was, this is about 16 years ago. It was an echo chamber of just everybody just wanting to agree with each other. There was no real conversation.
Isn't that sort of what happens now? I mean, everything is a bit of an echo chamber politically. Like, if people follow the podcast that's going to say the things they want,
Yeah.
or follow the channel that says the things they like. I mean, there is no common ground anymore.
No,
is
and
there?
it was so ridiculous that Mike Rosen complained to my program director, Chris Olinger, at the time. Mike Rosen was like a big wig on KOA, and I was just doing weekends and fill-ins. And people were calling his show during the week complaining about me because I had a difference of opinion on things on the weekends. And Mike Rosen made sure that I basically lost my regular shift there at KOA. And there you go, Mike Rosen, up yours, I guess, on that one.
Up yours, Mike.
So that's how I feel about that one. But what happened was nothing came to be full time. And it was 2.5 years. I really wanted to be full time there. Didn't happen. And then the Fan had an opportunity to work weekends. Just the same thing I was doing at KOA, nothing different. And I just said, okay, because this is not working out here. Sometimes you got to know, like the girl in high school, sometimes you got to know when it's over. And we can still be friends,
Yeah.
I guess, but we're not, time to move on.
Well, one major difference between sports media and actually the sport, the athletes who are playing it, is the careers are over pretty soon for the athlete.
Yeah.
I mean, the average career in the NFL, 3.5 years. I don't know what it is in Major League Baseball or hockey, but probably a little bit more, but comparable.
Yeah.
It's over while you're still young. And then you got the rest of your life to try to figure out something else to do. But for someone in sports journalism or media, if you're resilient and can bounce back from the disappointments, you can have a long career.
I've been fired more than 10 times. Pretty famously about a year ago, almost to this point.
Yeah.
We were on the
Same day.
Same day. we got that in common.
Yeah.
And it was disappointing because of, I think, the legacy that we had built up. It was just when bad managers get in charge, they don't fire themselves. And they'll look to scapegoat people who are on the air. before they say, hey, it was my fault.
And you feel like you were scapegoated then?
Oh, there's zero doubt about it. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Zero. And I
Do you
learned,
think what has followed has vindicated you?
Yes, I do. And I'm an angry little guy. And I'm petty, and I look for that sort of vindication, and I continue. It's a big motivator for me.
That's what I was going to ask about.
It gets me up in the morning.
Yeah, is that what motivates you to do so much? Because
Yeah.
you do, not just your show, PhD, Columbus, Hastings, and DMAC on Altitude Radio, but you also do a podcast, and you do, streaming, and you're going to all these events and stuff like that. Is that sort of motivation to stick it to your old haters?
Yes.
Part of why you do so much?
1,000%. It is an incredible motivator. It always has been. Listen, man, I'm not angry against KOA per se, but I enjoyed beating the snot out of them for years and years and years while I was doing afternoons over at the Fan, no doubt about it. Although I really do love the people on the air. So it's a weird deal because I don't feel the people on the air are the enemy. I believe it's the management, or it used to be. Everything changes, though. So the same people that nobody's in charge now that was in charge sort of like back then. And
well, now it's like younger people who are in charge who may not have the experience or the instinct to deal with difficult situations or complex problems at work, right? I mean, what we faced was we had a manager who was younger than us,
yes,
but thought he knew more than you in particular.
No doubt about it. And he was looking to prove that point constantly.
Yeah.
So that's just a toxic situation to be in. And God forbid you complain about, not even complain, God forbid you even suggest anything. Because if that's not coming, it's kind of, I could kind of compare it to head coaching. And for example, I know why players do have a hard time getting in the coaching realm, because head coaches don't want to be shown up. They don't want to hire somebody who necessarily knows more than them or is going to be better than them.
Some rising star, right?
It's difficult.
It takes a very balanced ego to do so.
Yeah.
Like Mike Shanahan at the end of his career in D.C. had Sean McVay, had his son, had Matt LaFleur. I mean, you give props to Shanny for that?
Absolutely. I mean, not everybody's like that.
No,
I mean,
no.
smart leaders, smart coaches, smart managers will constantly surround themselves with smarter people than them to do better. But when you have narcissistic or people that are filled with all sorts of weirdness that need that sort of justification for their job itself, the best leaders that I have found are those who don't have that particular ego. And I am very lucky right now at Altitude Sports to have a boss who's just like that. Kevin Shockey, my boss, and Dave Fleck, my two big bosses, are fantastic. Fantastic. And it's great to work with people like that. And that being said, yeah, it opened like, hey, listen, I need a job. I need to work. By the way, having to have to work isn't the worst thing in the world, man. I mean, and I've worked with all sorts of people. And I find people that don't have to work some of the worst people in the world to work with. They're unmotivated. They're lazy. They don't care, and they're quick to tell you about it. And they show that maybe out loud and also with their actions. And who wants to be around somebody like that? Not me.
Isn't that sort of the struggle with working with the recently retired athlete?
Yes, it can be.
Who has a lot of money?
Yes.
What is his motivation?
And I would tell any athletes, if we're doing a show for multi-million-dollar athletes, don't work full-time, because you'll let other people down that do need those jobs. Work part-time. Just scratch that itch a little bit.
But isn't there an idea that working on a radio show is part-time?
I think, well,
people believe it.
You would know better than most, but I think a lot of ex-athletes think that's exactly what it is. This thing is easy. Who couldn't do this? I used to make fun of these people. How hard could it be? There's nothing to it. But there is something day after day, week after week, month after month, theoretically year after year. It is actually relentless. And most ex-athletes, frankly, they don't have the stamina for it. They're not tough enough for it. It takes a certain amount of toughness to be able to have that dedication to it day in and day out.
Is it a physical toughness? Is it mental? What are you talking about?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, you've got to be mentally sharp to be able to focus for 3 to 4 hours at a pop. And physically, yeah, you got to be all right. with lights and a camera or a microphone, like there is a certain amount of physical that. And what I've learned about a lot of athletes, sadly, is their bodies are beat up. So just sitting in one, well, again, I could just go back to you, but sitting in one place for an extended amount of time isn't always the easiest thing in the world. And sadly, especially with football players, the CTE stuff, which is so scary, and I feel for so many of my friends who are ex-pros, is a real thing. To just be like this situation here with lights, there's a lot of your friends that play football that couldn't do what you're doing right now. They just couldn't do it because they couldn't do this right now. It would be physically impairing to them, unfortunately.
Football players have a hard time talking for 4 hours about anything, really, because we never were asked to. We were asked to shut up,
right,
and just play, just memorize this playbook. Unless you're a quarterback, you're in the huddle, you get to talk,
right?
But nobody else gets to talk,
right?
And so the idea of articulating a thought and peeling back layers, because what you can do is take, let's talk about this pen.
Let's go.
And you could do 4 hours on this pen.
No doubt about it.
Right?
Yeah.
But a football player who never had the training to talk or was able to talk out the components of a pen or what the fuck that means,
right,
doesn't have that ability, right?
All right, so it goes like this. Tell me something interesting about this pen. Anything.
Well, the clicker there is really sleek and shiny compared to the long kind of tubular area.
Do you know this was actually designed in Des Moines, Iowa, like that on purpose?
No, tell me more.
Well, what happened in Des Moines was it was right before a presidential caucus. They do caucuses in Iowa.
Yeah.
And this was actually Hubert Humphrey. He was unable to write with a quill pen back then. So he needed somebody to design something that he was going to write on. And he thought Iowa manufacturing plants were going to be excellent in terms of getting him that vote.
Wow. Look at that. See, you just pulled that out of your ass.
Yeah, I just made that part up.
Hubert
of course.
Humphreys.
But if we wanted to go to Iowa, we could have talked about, you could have transitioned into Kirk Ferentz was, the coach of Iowa. He just got suspended or whatever. He got like a half-game suspension. Oh, James Ferentz was his son who played center for the Broncos. James Ferentz was a guy on the border who liked to fight everybody in training camp. What was it like to have life on the border of an NFL team? Did you feel like you had to fight anybody? Who was the best fight that you ever had against?
So when you are talking about a subject and you're deciding where to go, is there like a thing that pops up in your brain with a bunch of different routes, and I could go this way, I could go that way, I could go and then once you go that way, it opens up a whole new kind of sort of network of areas you could go to?
Zero doubt about it. And that's where you've got to have really good partners too, because I can do it on my own if I had to, for sure. No doubt about it. I could do endless hours of radio completely on my own, or leaning on perhaps callers or texters, or maybe a producer.
You probably do. Like when you're not on the air, are you still talking?
All the time.
If you're in your car by yourself, are you still talking?
All the time. I rehearse, but see, again, is it a hobby or is it a profession?
Yeah.
Is this who I am and what I do, or is it just something on the side? And for me, it's a profession. Like, I quit my day job a long time ago. I have no other skills, Nate, than this basically right here.
What if you could be a good salesman? You could be in sales.
Well, I think I have been, actually.
Yeah.
And I have highest regards to sales. My dad was an independent salesman for publishing materials for schools and libraries. He worked for himself for his entire life. I have an incredible regard for salespeople, and I think I have been doing sales. I think we're all selling ourselves. What I have to sell myself, that you give a shit. 5'7" and shrinking dude. Why should anybody care what I've got to say about sports?
Yeah.
So I've got to sell you that I'm worth listening to. Well, how do I do that? In my mind, I do it by going to places and asking questions and being part of the scene. Because if I don't do that, why does my opinion matter more than anybody else? So I made an entire career about being there and having insight that perhaps you wouldn't have, because you, the one person, doesn't have the same access that I do. So being there is way more important for me than just watching it and reading it. That's how, and I really lean into people like you and other ex-athletes, and I'm always more friendly with guys when they're done playing. I used to try to be friends with guys when they were playing when I was younger, and I realized that's a complete waste of time. You guys don't take us seriously. Why would you? You achieved all of our dreams. None of us could really do it. So why would you take us seriously? But
Do you think that was the dream of every sports journalist initially, to play it?
I've always...
And then do you think that
No.
some of the content they create is out of bitterness that they weren't that person?
Yes, some. I'd like to think, because I made the choice to walk away from sports, not the other way. I wasn't cut by my high school team. I did not make it. Not only did I make it in every sport I tried to do, but I stayed competitive in sports. I ran in a trail race last weekend. I've done 10 marathons. I do compete. Even to this day, I compete. So I do have a hard time understanding guys in sports, ladies in sports, who have never competed in sports.
Are there some of those?
Oh, yeah. There's lots of them.
Yeah.
And
Can you discern a sort of difference in understanding of the sport from those people?
listen, there's smart people all over the place, and I'm not going to doubt them, but I think they have a hard time. I do have a hard time relating to somebody when they're talking about sports if it's so clear they've never participated in sports. If there is something about competing, Nate, that just can't be beat. And so, listen, man, I'm not the greatest athlete in the world, but I try. I know what it's like. I put a number on 2 weeks ago. I know what it's like with a guy coming down, behind me trying to pass me in a race. And he did pass me, that asshole. And I wasn't able to catch him. And I know what it feels like to catch somebody and try to race ahead of them. I think there is something to it. So I don't know, man, if you've never done that, I think it must be hard to talk about sports. How can you understand or relate to stuff if you've literally never done it? I might not have played the game like at the highest level, but I certainly competed at sports. I still do.
Does anyone organize any sort of media games where sports media members can come together and compete?
There was a media softball league for years and years and years at Kennedy Ballpark that it was a media league. So you kind of got to see sort of everybody out there. And I'll tell you this. Most people in sports media did compete at some level.
Yeah.
The vast majority did, but not all.
Someone should organize a game like that and then have the professional athletes in the area come and cover it. That would be
That would be pathetic.
That would be hilarious.
That would be sad.
All right, so you've worked in radio in this market for 25 years.
Yes. Yeah.
How important is your co-host and the kind of the chemistry you have with that person?
Critical. If you don't have good chemistry, your ship is sunk. There's only so much.
How
you can
quickly
do,
you
on your
know?
own. Instantly.
First 5 minutes of the first show?
I could tell you within probably 30 seconds of sitting down with somebody if they're going to be good or not.
Really?
It's like that.
So what is the feeling like when you know in the first 30 seconds, but you've realized that mountains were just moved to put this person in front of you after an exhaustive search?
Yeah.
Here is your co-host, and in 30 seconds, it's...
Yeah, it sucks. And then you realize I've got a mortgage, I got kids in college, I got a wife, I got responsibilities as an adult that I've got to take care of. So I'm going to give it the best shot I can because, again, this isn't a hobby for me. This is who I am, and I need this to pay bills and live my life. The money in media is not incredible. Not for the vast majority of people. I think people, it's like I get compared a lot to, like, say, a Howard Stern. I mean, that is such a joke. It's ridiculous because of the vast difference in amounts of money. It's nowhere close.
You're saying you don't make as much as Howard Stern?
I don't make even as anywhere close to that. Nor
Maybe
do I,
if you kind of push the envelope a little more, old Howard Stern style in the 90s and the early 2000s.
Well, in the 90s, I kind of did do that, because before I got into sports radio, I was the zany morning rock and roll disc jockey. That became a lot of sports talk stations. There is a specific reason why. When Justin Timberlake ripped off Janet Jackson's top and revealed her nipple, the FCC went on this just tear of finding stations individually rather than one. So you couldn't just find just CBS TV. You could find up to $500,000 every single affiliate that would air it. And because of that action, there was an incredible trickle-down effect on outrageous radio and TV. It almost went away in 6 months. It went away. And so all those outrageous shows that you used to hear no longer exist on terrestrial stations anymore. So a lot of rock stations that had these crazy shows, they pivoted towards what is a male-oriented topic, which is sports.
Yep.
And that's how a lot of sports talk stations are now on FM that used to be on AM.
Right.
They picked up NFL rights on Sundays to broadcast games, and they got a lot of morning show guys like me. And on the Sports Hub, and Fred Tutcher used to be on WBCN, which was the station, rock station I listened to growing up. Well, that became 98.5 the Sports Hub, and he was on the music station and is now on one of the top sports talk stations in the country. And so am I. And so is a guy like Craig Carton, who I worked with in college and professionally here in Denver. A lot of that FM outrageous morning show mentality just translated over to the FM signal to sports. And now everybody kind of does it. And there's been recently a more freezing of that. Like you can do, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Back in the day, I think things were probably they were too misogynistic, racist, over the top, because that's what got you the ratings. So terrestrial radio has to work harder now to get that, and I don't think that's a bad thing. There's plenty of other platforms out there, and I don't think it's a bad thing to be better as human beings.
Is that better as human beings, or are we less tolerant of opinions and jokes we don't approve of? Is the world better now than it was when people took a joke a little bit easier?
It's tricky. Because what is a joke and the levels of what's acceptable in comedy are different than what's acceptable on broadcast standards. So I had a great boss, Bob Richards. I've had a lot of great bosses as well as lousy bosses, but a great one, Bob Richards, once said to me in a meeting where we were getting in trouble. He goes, "All right, I'm not saying it wasn't funny, but yada yada yada."
Yeah.
So, but again, that's about being a professional. With what you're doing. And you can't cross every boundary depending on what platform you're on. So I chose this profession, so I have to be willing to accept the rules of engagement, and I am.
Have you crossed the line with a joke that got you in trouble?
Oh, sure. Well, one specific joke, I don't know. Hard to say. I don't have a memory for every single meeting I've been in to say, hey, you can't do this, you can't do that, you're in trouble for this, you're in trouble for that. Some stand out more than others, but there's nothing in particular. And at this point of my career, it's a fine line to watch because, listen, man, if you're not funny and entertaining and opinionated, you're not going to get ratings. So what degree can you walk on that line? And if you're just milquetoast and boring, which is the safest, easiest way to go, well, you're not going to have ratings either, and they're not going to be able to sell you. So how do you balance it? And that is something I've been trying to figure out day in and day out for 38 years of doing radio.
38 years. Well,
yeah.
So in the 25 you've been here in Denver, you've seen
Yeah.
a lot of incredible sports moments
Yeah.
in Denver with these teams. You've seen championships for every organization except the Rockies, right?
Yeah, and even they got to the World Series.
Yeah.
They got to the
Rocktober,
playoffs,
man.
but they did not win a championship, no.
Right.
But yes, I've been for everybody else.
Is Denver the best sports town in America?
Hard to beat, man. It's hard to beat. And
Can you name a better one?
No, because I'd have to factor in
Boston?
No,
Chicago?
because I'd factor in livability.
Yeah.
For example, the Patriots are stuck down there in Foxborough.
That's what I was going to say, because the centrally located
Yes.
stadiums and arenas, everything's right there. That doesn't exist in any other city.
No, and if you factor in the weather and then a vibrant college scene as well, not only at the Division I, but even lower, like at Metro or at Mines, or it's hard to beat Colorado, period. Never mind, we have all the other stuff too in terms of the outdoors and skiing, hiking, biking, Leadville, all the stuff that goes on there. I mean, no, I was offered a job in Boston. I turned down a job in Boston, my hometown, at WAAF, to work with Lyndon Byers as a hockey player and Greg Hill, who does mornings on WEEI, a sports talk station. So I was offered a job at a rock station with a guy who's been doing sports talk for years in Boston. And I turned it down because I was offered a job at KBPI at the same exact time, because I could live in Colorado, and I couldn't afford on the salary they offered me to live in Boston. And I have no regrets, even though it's 2,000 miles away from home. So, no, I don't. You got all 4 sports. You got major college. You got lower level college. And you have all the other stuff. No, I actually literally don't think there's a better place to live in the country than Denver, Colorado.
Yeah, there's a reason why all these former athletes as well who, didn't grow up around here.
Yeah.
I grew up in California. Pretty cool place to live as well.
Right.
And then moved out here to become a member of the Denver Broncos, moved back to California. Then I'm like, no, let's go back to Colorado. So many people come here and don't want to leave.
It makes it tough for guys like you who are dumb jock, ex-jocks, because the amount of competition you have, it's no big deal that you're an ex-Bronco. I mean, like, you gotta earn it. You got to earn whatever you do because
there's a lot of them out
There's
here.
a lot of them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of guys who didn't even play for the Broncos that have decided to retire in this area.
What the hell's
too.
that about, man?
Because
leave it for the ex-Broncos, man.
You'd be, if you were willing to live in Buffalo, if you were a great Bill, you'd be fine.
Yeah.
And even in San Francisco, man, where you're originally from, there's probably not a ton of ex-49ers that kind of live in that area. I'm sure there's some. It's still a great place to live. But it's probably not like here.
Yeah. What are some of your top moments that you've gotten to cover, that you've been fortunate enough to be around covering Denver sports?
The athlete that I've been lucky to cover who is so unique is Nikola Jokic. I've never been around anybody like Nikola Jokic. The most remarkable season was the 2015 Broncos. That they were, from Peyton being hurt to what Brock had to do to fill in, to actually winning the Super Bowl after losing it a couple years. The most surreal moment that I've ever had that was so cool was being on the ice when the Avalanche won in Game 6 in Tampa. On the ice, to walk through them, recording the players with their families, the Stanley Cup, all that when everything was said and done. The moment that just filled my heart with joy is when my younger son played in a high school all-star game and took 2 at-bats at Coors Field.
Wow.
To see him. And my older son got to play in a state championship hockey game at Pepsi Center on the ice, because nothing has you on the edge of your seat more than your own kids playing sports. So while, never mind all the things that I've actually participated in myself, but yes, the pro sports has been awesome. But really, my most amazing moments in sports, in all honesty, is watching my kids play and being a sports dad. And that would get me crying if I were to think about it a little bit deeper.
Well, let's think about it a little deeper. Because, I've got a boy who's 4.
Yeah.
My wife and I talk about football. She doesn't want him to play football.
Interesting.
Look at me. No. I'm kidding. I'm okay, right?
You're fine.
But the horror stories, you talk about CTE.
Yeah.
We see it in the news.
Yeah.
She goes to these alumni events. She's been to these things and heard about the benefits and all this stuff that is going to be required. And, hopefully I can make it to pension age. And by then, maybe I can get total and permanent disability for my cognitive impairment. But I'm going to have to fill out all this stuff. And, that scares any wife or any loved one. And she didn't know me as a football player.
Do you ever feel lucky? I'll ask you just one question here, because I know this is...
No, you can shoot it back.
Just one, though. Are you, at the end of the day, happier that most of your major injuries in football were actually below the neck rather than with the head? And I'm sure there's... Yeah, but I mean, you have some gruesome injuries that you've well detailed.
They've healed.
It's crazy, right?
They've healed.
And do you feel just somewhat lucky that you actually had everything you could enjoy as a pro athlete? I mean, you really did accomplish everything, but it was a shorter career. Do you think you kind of lucked out just a pinch?
With having it be a shorter career?
A little bit.
No, and I'll tell you why. Because when my career ended, I had just locked in the skill set needed to really excel. I was not a tight end in high school or college. I played wide receiver. I wanted to go to the NFL and play wide receiver and catch 100 balls like I was doing in college. And I played 2 years as a receiver and then was asked to move to tight end and develop a skill set on the move against the best in the world. That was really difficult to master. It took me a couple years trying to figure out my technique and blocking and special teams and this new body frame to be able to be effective. And in the last 2 years of my career, I played 6, years 5 and 6, I started to figure that out. I was playing some damn good ball, and I believe now I'm finally in a place as a tight end where I can really excel. And so that's when it ended because I got hurt. Shanahan got fired. McDaniels came in, clear cut the whole forest, and I couldn't find my way back. My body was falling apart. I mean, tight end was not a natural body type for me.
Right.
I had to carry a little bit too much weight, and my groin and my hamstring perpetually sore, and it would eventually snap, right? But the skill set, I knew what to do on the field in every situation. I was the fucking emergency kicker. I was the emergency quarterback.
Right.
I played every special teams. I could play every offensive
Right.
team. So I had the brain for it, right? And the older you get, the more you understand where you're supposed to be, and you don't have to necessarily be the fastest guy out there anymore or the biggest or the strongest, which I never was. It was about my brain and my ability situationally to put myself in the right place to make the play. And I would make a play over a guy who was a lot bigger, stronger,
Right.
faster. So, no, I wanted to play longer because I knew what I could do. And it was so devastating to, as I was developing the skill set, have to face the end. And so many guys who play for 3.5 years
Yeah.
face a similar scenario
Yeah.
where, like, I know how to do this now, and I'm having to say goodbye
Yeah.
because either my body's breaking down or I'm just the odd man out on a training camp roster.
Yeah, if you could have got a couple more years, that would have been probably pretty amazing. But you do leave the game without severe head injuries and trauma, and your body feels pretty good.
But
you
then,
look great.
but then, thanks. Thank you. Did you just look at my nipples when you said that?
A little bit.
But the weird thing about former players and health and how you exit the game, there's some stuff we just don't understand. I did all the things that I was asked to do. There's guys who played half as long and only got hit half as many times who can't formulate a sentence now. Some guys are more genetically predisposed to be affected by a headshot or the way they hit or the way they recover or their diet or whatever it might be, or they don't sleep or they drink alcohol or they're taking steroids or they eat a lot of fatty foods or they eat a lot of sugar or they are depressed or they have no purpose in life or they don't read or they have no other skills or they didn't pick up guitar and learn a new neuronal pathway in their brain to develop some skill sets or some ideas that'll get them out of fucking bed in the morning.
Right.
So many football players deteriorate mentally because physically they stop moving.
Right.
And you are a great example of what happens when you just keep moving. And just keep talking and just keep going.
Yeah, so I'll give you this quick little story. So for probably reasons of more of a midlife crisis than anything, I rode my bike from Lone Tree to Aspen over 4 days. And I won't get into... I actually do have an hour-long podcast about that, so you can look an hour-long explanation with videos.
Where can people find that?
You can on YouTube, Kill You With Truth, or look DMAC on
Okay,
YouTube.
good.
Subscribe. Nate's on with me basically every single day, which is awesome. And Chad Brown is as well, and we're developing hopefully more things and hopefully bigger partnerships here with Gorilla, who we have a great relationship. We love what they've done here. But I did, it's Journey of the Average Athlete. And so, brought to you by Journey Spice and
You
Dinner
don't have to
Rose.
do
I'll
that.
get all my plugs in.
Please don't.
So, so I was finishing this epic trip that I thought about quitting maybe 1,000 times. And I talked to a very good friend of mine who's done this ride before. And he said, stop in the local store at Twin Lakes before you do Independence Pass, which is the final big push to Aspen, which is 17 miles uphill, very steep Independence Pass. And there's a little country store that they sell just, knickknacks, paddywhacks, give a dog a bone, that sort of thing. And I go in the little store to get a little coffee and whatever before I start this final ascent over 4 days, which was, its own little story. And there's kind of a hippie looking dude, and he looks out the window at my bike, goes, oh, nice bike. So, I got a bike guy, so I can talk bikes a little bit. And I'm talking to him, and we're just kind of, talking about the ride, and I go, well, I'm a little bit nervous. He goes, why? He goes, well, I've never ridden Independence Pass, and I knew what was ahead of me. It's 17 miles uphill. It's going to suck. It's going to be hard to do, and then you go downhill. But this is it. I'm not going to quit at this point. But it's still hard, Nate. It wasn't going to be easy to do. And I've been doing this for 4 days, over 240 miles, whatever the elevation was, and I got 17 miles to go. And he goes, well, and he kind of shrugs his shoulders. He looks at me, he goes, just keep pedaling. And it was just that moment of just like, yeah, like I don't have to really make this overly complicated. I mean, like, just keep on pedaling. And I think that's essentially what I've done for an entire career. I just wake up that morning, despite getting fired, despite ups and downs in your personal life, And getting fired is a big one. But when I got fired like a year ago, almost to the date of this, on day one of being fired, I stuck a phone in front of myself and I said, okay, this is day one.
I'm going to document this journey.
The best that I know how. And I found out, I would get a little emotional. I was supported not only by a lot of people in broadcasting, but also the teams I covered. That was probably the most rewarding, surprising thing, is how much outpouring I got from the local teams that I had covered all these years. That surprised me and humbles me and does make me a little bit emotional. They appreciated it, and they reached out to me to support me when I needed it the most. And that was incredibly rewarding. And I'm not going to say it's going to bias what I say about what's going on, but it was impactful. So my advice to anybody, if you're in a tough stretch, or to any athletes or anybody in life, is what can you do more than do the best you can that day? Keep on pedaling.
And is that advice you would give to a young, aspiring media member?
And the other thing I would tell them is don't wait for somebody to give you permission. Now, with technology the way it is, stick that phone in front of you. Start. What are you waiting for? Seriously.
And yet, the younger generation's a little bit quicker to get discouraged by a failure.
I get it. And it takes persistence.
Yeah.
And is it a hobby or is it a profession? You'll know when you start something, you'll know about 2 months into it how serious you really are about it. Almost anybody, go back to Joe Williams, can do a radio show. Anybody can do a week. Seriously. A month? All right. 2 months? You'll get through it. Once you go through something for about 8 weeks, you know if you really can do this thing or not. And if you can get through it and you still have the motivation, 8 weeks from where you started, you may be in it for the long haul. Anybody, I'm not impressed with anybody who starts a podcast. Show me you're doing it 6 months from now. And I've had tons of young people call me for advice, and I've given them the same advice time after time. I challenge all of them. I say, call me in a month and let me know how it's going. I hardly hear from anybody. That is no joke. I wish that wasn't the truth, but I'll spend time with almost anybody advising them if they want it, and I'll challenge them. Call me in a month and let me know. And the phone hardly ever rings.
38 years later, you're still pedaling, man.
I'm still pedaling. I'll never stop. I mean, I literally will never stop. I love what I do, and I'm motivated by what I do. And I figured out the trick to sports, in my mind. It's not about the score. It's about the story, for me. So the story and the people are always way more interesting than the score. And I think that's the biggest difference between people who have played the sport and people who haven't. They appreciate the story more than the score.
Well, Denver is damn lucky to have you here,
my man.
D-Mac. Appreciate you joining us. Darren McKee, you got somewhere to be. So
I do.
You got another big surprise. You got your other gig. This guy's got to get to the radio, but I want to thank you for joining me, D-Mac. Darren McKee, icon in Denver sports.
And really
the story of Denver sports could not be told without you, D-Mac.
In terms of dumb jocks and ex-jocks, I don't know many people more talented than you, Nathan Jackson. Seriously, and I went Nathan right there.
I appreciate that.
And your family should be incredibly proud of you. Your small family and your bigger family and the Broncos family, and I feel like you're like a brother to me, man. So you're my guy. We'll talk later.
Thanks, D-Mac.
But you've always been one of my favorite guys.
Love you, buddy.
Love you too, pal. See
That's it for us on Dumb Jock. He's Darren McKee. I'm Nathan Jackson. We'll see you guys next time.